Welcome back to another episode of Secrets of the Archive, and we are still on Box 3, and we're on the International Fortean Organization, Info, on Folder 6 here. And I think we're now on the Ghosts of Washington. Now this looks like a little booklet published by Info in 1987. It says this little book makes no claim to be an exhaustive list of unusual and legend-bearing sites in Washington, D.C. It is instead a step towards a more complete catalog of such places. We hope it will be expanded to include Washington's environments in Maryland and Virginia. Info, of course, makes no claim regarding the authenticity of any Washington haunting, although Forteans may suspect that a grain of truth lurks in even the most outrageous fiction. Regarding ghosts and hauntings, who is to say what exists just past our physical senses that may, under certain circumstances, become part of our philosophy? Our advice is caveat lector, let the reader beware, and as good Forteans take nothing all that seriously. As the proverb enjoins, that which we cannot laugh at we should not take seriously. Okay, and here's a little table of contents, so we can expect to look at the Three Sisters, Halcyon House, Foxhall, Oak Hill Cemetery, Woodrow Wilson House, Octagon House, Stephen Decatur House, St. John's Church, the White House, map of Washington, National Theater, Pension Building, Lincoln Memorial, U.S. Capitol Building, Washington Navy Yard, Fort McNair, Fort Washington. Then it says a Fortean Interest, Smithsonian, Library of Congress, National Archives, and National Geographic Society, edited by James Thiessen. Let's just read it. Why not? Let's just read it. The Three Sisters, upstream from Key Bridge, Georgetown. The tales about these rock formations in the Potomac, go back to Indian legend. Since a large number of Indian legends seem to have been created by the white man, one should perhaps remain skeptical about the curse of the Three Sisters. The tale is, however, that three beautiful Indian maidens, daughters of a medicine man in a village on the Virginia side of the river, drowned here. In doing so, they cursed the site so that no one would ever be successful in crossing the river at that point. The Three Sisters Bridge, planned to span the Potomac here, has never been built, and now seems to be in limbo. Perhaps the curse of the maidens lives on. Halcyon House, and this is in brackets Stoddart House, 3400 Prospect Street, Northwest, not open to public. This home was built in 1783 by Benjamin Stoddart, the first Secretary of the Navy. Near Georgetown waterfront, the home commands a fine view of the river. There are two alleged ghosts in residence. One is of Stoddart himself. The other is that of Albert Adset Clemens, a wealthy eccentric who believed that as long as he continued to add rooms to the house, he would never die. Perhaps he should have added more rooms. It is reputed that a tunnel once connected the house with the Potomac and that it may have been used as a stop in the Underground Railroad. Reminds me a little bit of the story of, was it like the heiress to the Winchester fortune or something? It was some, or Remington, I don't know, it was some bullet or gun manufacturer who had a crazy house, kept on adding rooms to it because she had dreams that she was supposed to. For more information on Clemens, consult Washington's Most Famous Ghost Stories by John Alexander, Washington Books, 1975. Foxhall, 2908 North Street, Northwest. Built around 1790, this home was for years said to have a 10 o'clock ritual. The lights would go out at 10, regardless of whether the light came from candles, gaslight, or electricity. The phenomenon was supposedly caused by the carryings-on of a deceased housekeeper who had always insisted on turning out the lights at 10. The ritual hasn't been reported lately. It may be that the institution of daylight savings time has confused the poor ghost, and she has relented in the performance of her nightly task. Oak Hill Cemetery, the Van Ness Mausoleum, 30th and R Streets, northwest along Rock Creek. General John Peter Van Ness was a mayor of Washington in the late 19th century. Upon his death in 1846, the hearse was drawn to the cemetery by 6 white horses. Upon seeing the horses dip their heads behind a mound, one mourner supposedly said, "They've buried their heads with their master." Since then, 6 spectral headless white horses have been reportedly seen making their way from the site of the Van Ness House, where Pan American Union now stands at the 17th and Constitution Avenue, Northwest, to the cemetery on the anniversary of the general's death. John Alexander writes, "Just a few years ago, a motorist tried to explain to police that he had run his car off Rock Creek Parkway because he had seen the shimmering forms of 6 headless white horses up by the Van Ness Mausoleum. His excuse may have kept the legend alive, but it did nothing for the man's reputation for not being able to hold his liquor." Woodrow Wilson House, 2340 South Street, Northwest. Broken in health and grief-stricken that Congress had rejected America's membership in his treasured League of Nations, President Woodrow Wilson died in this home. It is said that sounds of someone sobbing and of someone shuffling along with a cane, just as Wilson did in his last years, can be heard here. This reminds me, I really want to do a video on, there are some interesting stories about Ottawa. There's some interesting, politically themed ghost stories. I have to do that someday. I've been wanting to do that for years. Let's continue here. The Octagon House, Newark Avenue and 18th Street Northwest. One of the most interesting historic buildings in America, the Octagon was designed by Dr. Thomas Thornton, the first architect of the capital. He also designed Tudor Palace in Georgetown, which, alas, does not seem to be haunted. Curiously, the Octagon is not shaped as its name implies. It is hexagonal, having 6 sides rather than 8. The name Octagon was given by the family of Colonel John Taylor, the first residents of the home. Taylor, one of George Washington's closest friends, was listed in 1806 as the wealthiest man in America. Construction on the Octagon began in 1798, when the federal government was still housed in Philadelphia. Completed in 1801 with 20 rooms arranged in 3 stories, the home is equipped with tunnels, now closed, that connected it with the White House and the Potomac. Nancy Davis, director of the Octagon, says that the home of the last surviving building that illustrates the craftsmanship of the original federal city. 80% of the floors are original. The English terracotta mantels are intact, and the arches display original craftsmanship. The home has splendid composition work, architectural details similar to plasterwork made from a material consisting of hide glue, linseed oil, and whiting pressed into a mold. The composition work, decorations on chair rails, mantels, pilasters, and the chimney piece in the treaty room, see below, was made by George Andrews. Andrews had also been commissioned to produce the detailed composition work in the White House before the fire of 1812. The home was spared the destruction when the British burned Washington during the War of 1812. The Taylors cannily offered the Octagon to the French ambassador as his official and temporary residence, thereby protecting it from harm. That's smart. They later rented the Octagon fully furnished to President and Dolly Madison, who lived there from September 1814 to March 1815. The thorough British had also burned the White House, and the first family needed housing while the gutted mansion was being rebuilt. The Octagon received additional historical distinction when the peace treaty ended the War of 1812. When the peace treaty ending the War of 1812 was signed there on February 17, 1815. Regarding the Madison stay at the Octagon, there are hints that Dolly received some clandestine visits from Aaron Burr. Dolly's spirit is said to manifest as a coldness scented with lilacs, her favorite fragrance. Regarding the Octagon's reputation as a haunted house, Dolly Madison's spirit is by no means the home's only claim to ghostly fame. The majority of the hauntings relate to the Taylor family. One of the Taylor daughters had fallen in love with the wrong kind of man, according to her father. The poor girl, distraught at her father's rejection, committed suicide by jumping from the 2nd floor, landing in the magnificent stairwell. She broke her neck on the floor below. Over the years, the staff has had trouble keeping a carpet over that area. It keeps wanting to fling itself back when no one is looking, to expose the place on the floor where the girl died. That's creepy. Most of the ghostly phenomena have taken place on the 2nd floor landing near the banister, and on the 3rd floor, and have been reported since the middle of the last century. The phenomena include footsteps and a plaintive female voice. Of peculiar interest is the account of Superintendent Ulrich H. Clay, who has on several occasions found the lights in the building on after he had just turned off all the switches. On returning, he would find the doors wide open where he had locked them just a few minutes before. The footsteps of both a man and a woman have been heard repeatedly by witnesses, especially on the 2nd and 3rd floors. Chandeliers have also appeared to swing of their own volition. The assistant curator once heard footsteps on the 3rd floor while she was working on the 2nd floor, knowing that the 3rd floor was closed to visitors and in fact had been shut off completely for a long time. She was puzzled as to who might be walking around over her head. She tiptoed up to the 3rd floor. No one was to be seen, but the dust on the floor revealed a series of very light footprints, far too light to have been made by a human, yet indicating 2 delicate feet belonging to an unseen woman. The home was in the possession of the Taylor family until it was purchased in 1902 by the American Institute of Architects, headquartered in the modern building rising behind the Octagon, who still maintain it. This is partial sources, Where the Ghosts Are by Hans Holzer, and Christina del Sesto writing in the Washington Post for September 10, 1987. Stephen Decatur House. H Street, and Jackson Place Northwest. Another lab robe design, this home was a third building of on Lafayette Square. Commissioned by Commodore Stephen Decatur, hero of the Barbary Wars, it was paid for out of the prize money won from his famous exploits. Decatur was killed in a duel on March 14, 1820. The window of the room in which he died has been walled up in an effort to prevent his apparition from starting out onto H Street. Supposedly the ghostly sobs of his widow can also be heard at times. St. John's Church, 16th and 8th Streets, Northwest. Designed by Benjamin Latrobe, this was the second structure on Lafayette Square. The White House was the first. One legend holds that when the bell tolls the death of a famous personage, 6 ghostly figures visit the church at midnight and sit with folded arms in the pew of the presidents. They soon fade away, however, into the thin air from which they came. And the White House, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue Northwest. Perhaps the most famous tale of the supernatural that comes from the White House is the well-known dream that Abraham Lincoln had shortly before his assassination. Lincoln's own story of his dream was taken down by Ward Hill Lamon, Lincoln's secretary and close friend. About 10 days ago, I retired very late. I had been up waiting for important dispatches from the front. I could not have been long in bed when I fell into a slumber, for I was weary. I soon began to dream. There seemed to be a death-like stillness about me. Then I heard subdued sobs, as if a number of people were weeping. I thought I left my bed and wandered downstairs. There the silence was broken by the same pitiful sobbing, but the mourners were invisible. I went from room to room. No living person was in sight, but the same mournful sounds of distress met me as I passed along. It was light in all the rooms. Every object was familiar to me, but where were all the people who were grieving as if their hearts would break? I was puzzled and alarmed. What could be the meaning of all this? Determined to find the cause of the state of things so mysterious and so shocking, I kept on until I arrived at the east room, which I entered. There I met with a sickening surprise. Before me was a catafalque. I've never heard that word before. Before me was a catafalque, on which rested a corpse wrapped in funeral vestments. Around it were stationed soldiers who were acting as guards, and there were a throng of people, some gazing mournfully upon the corpse, whose face was covered, others weeping pitifully. Who was the dead in the White House? I demanded of one of the soldiers. The president, was his answer. He was killed by an assassin. Then there came a loud burst of grief from the crowd, which awoke me from my dream. I slept no more that night. Interesting. So this was a dream of Abraham Lincoln's. It sounds so much like a forerunner story from in the maritime provinces in Canada, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island. They have stories about forerunners, which are, they aren't dreams usually. It's in waking life. People will hear something, or see something. Usually hearing something like 3 knocks at the door or something. But in some stories, they will walk in and see an apparition of themselves or somebody else, or they will hear a sound that sounds mysterious to them, but later it gets replayed during the sorrowful event related to the person close to them who died, if that makes sense. Like there's maybe a story of they'll hear disembodied wagon wheels on the road, and they don't know what that means. But then later, one of their friends dies or a relative dies, and then when their coffin gets taken away from the house, they hear that same sound that they heard before. So it's kind of a forerunner story, but in Abraham Lincoln's dream. As well as being of great interest to dream analysts, Lincoln's dream has also been studied for its hints of clairvoyance and astral projection. Lincoln's fascination with the supernatural has been well documented. In spite of the Lincoln family maintaining that no seances were ever held in the White House, other sources have claimed that such activities were a regular feature of the Lincoln administration. Theodore Roosevelt, according to Bess Furman in White House Profile, often fancied that he felt Lincoln's spirit. During Franklin D. Roosevelt's administration in the 1930s, his secretary saw the figure of Lincoln in his one-time bedroom during the afternoon. The ghost was seated on the bed, pulling on his boots, as if in a hurry to go somewhere. Eleanor Roosevelt freely admitted to having often felt Lincoln's presence. Many visitors to the White House have slept in Lincoln's bedroom, largely because it is one of the most stately rooms in the mansion. Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands spoke of the constant knockings at her door, followed by footsteps. Upon checking, she always found the outside corridor empty. Margaret Truman also slept in that area of the White House. She often heard knocking at her bedroom door at 3 a.m. Whenever she checked, there was no one there. While the ghost of Abraham Lincoln is probably the best-known specter of the presidential mansion, there are many other haunts. Thomas Jefferson, whose scientific pursuits once had him cover the floor of the White House room with fossil bones, is sometimes heard making music in the Yellow Oval Room. Mary Todd Lincoln is supposed to have once remarked, my, how that Mr. Jefferson does play his violin." Andrew Old Hickory Jackson is said to have been detected stomping and swearing and indulging in ribald laughter, and not surprisingly, considering Mr. Jackson's rough-hewn frontier character. John Adams' wife Abigail is said to be observed now and then carrying loads of laundry to hang in the East Room. The East Room was unfinished when John and Abigail lived there, and she considered it the driest place in the house. Their spirit was indomitable in life. Does it remain so? Even as to where to hang the wash. Potential source Where the Ghosts Are by Hans Holzer. So there is a stray cat. I don't know if you can hear it. He comes by food sometimes. I'm maybe going to hold off here and restart when the cat goes away. Okay, now we're on National Theatre, East Street between 13th and 14th Street Northwest. Love triangles provide the most of the human basis for ghost stories, really, and the Spectre... Let me try that again. Love triangles provide most of the human basis for ghost stories, and the Spectre resident of the National Theatre is no exception. The story begins in 1885, when actor John McCullough vied with another actor for the affections of a leading lady. The competition deepened into hot and angry resentment. The two actors found it increasingly difficult to be gentlemanly towards each other, and it was only a matter of time before a bitter fight broke out. The struggle was intense and long-lasting. It ended with a gunshot, and a body slumped in the dust. John McCullough was dead. His body was buried in a grave that to this day no one has found. The pistol was tossed away. The ghost of John McCullough has been seen on several occasions at the National Theatre since 1896. At the time of the first sighting, the phantom visitor was a front-page newspaper story. Actors have since spotted him sitting in the audience. Doormen and watchmen have spoken of several ghostly figures. In 1932, however, when the local police wanted to search for the remains of John McCullough, the regular performers at the theatre began a strong and successful protest. The last sighting, according to national sources, was in 1976. The most recent development in the story carried the dateline 1982. At that time, the theatre was being renovated, and a worker discovered a rusty old pistol in the basement. We do not know if this was the pistol that ended John McCullough's career. That part of it, at least, that people might pay to see. The source is Jennifer Harper, writing the Washington Times, October 31st, 1985. The Pension Building, 440 G Street Northwest. Designed in 1882 to house government employees working on the pensions of America's war veterans, the Pension Building is now the National Building Museum and celebrates America's building trades. The celebrated 1,200-foot frieze encircling the building commemorates the Civil War. There are said to be some anomalous observations to be made in the building, including a footless ghost. Strange images are also alleged to have appeared on the simulated marble columns, which, by the way, are the largest columns in the Western Hemisphere. The columns have been painted over, unfortunately, in several redecorations. They painted over marble columns. That should be illegal. The Lincoln Memorial. The Mall at 23rd Street. One of Washington's most famous monuments, the Lincoln Memorial, is not without its tale of the supernatural. Almost regularly, the National Park Service employees who staff the memorial enter the impressive basement structure, visible through windows at the lower left of the grand stairway, and find the lights on. They dutifully turn them off, lock the doors, and leave. Upon entering the basement to prepare for the next tour, they often find the lights on. No one has been able to explain who turns the lights on after the staff leave. Some claim that a ghost who seems to want to avoid the dark is committed to keeping the basement lit. Like living people, some ghosts may be afraid of the dark, although it may not be productive to speculate on what the ghosts may fear. Thank you. I like that. I like that they put that caveat in there. The United States Capitol Building. This may well be the most important building in the world without a street address. Begun in 1793, when George Washington laid the cornerstone, the history of the building has been rife with haunts. Cat lovers may take exception to the story, but a demon cat is said to haunt the basement area where the catafalque is stored. And in brackets is an area originally intended to be Washington's tomb. From here, the demon cat sometimes prowls through the corridors of the Capitol. When encountered, it appears in the size of a normal house cat, swells to the size of a tiger, growls menacingly, and leaps to attack. Fortunately, it vanishes in mid-air, explodes, or jumps over its hapless would-be victims. Wow. The demon cat was last seen by guard Fred Twomby in the spring of 1977, according to Jennifer Harper in the Washington Times for October 31st, 1985. Others maintain that the cat's appearance portends a national tragedy or a change in the political administration. An oft-repeated tale concerns certain very visible reddish stains in the circular staircase to the south of the rotunda, part of the original building before the House and Senate wings were added. Tradition has it that the stains are the blood of the British soldiers who torched the capital during the War of 1812. Over the years, many attempts have been made to remove the stains, but they have so far resisted every kind of cleaning agent used. Often temporarily cleaned away, it seems to be only a matter of time until they return. Other capital phantoms include ghostly chickens, never seen but heard clucking, the ghost of Pierre L'Enfant, still gloomily waiting to be paid for laying out the plan for the city of Washington, a sneezing ghost, a stonemason who was somehow sealed into one of the walls, and John Quincy Adams, who is said to have been seen in the old House chamber re-delivering his last speech, in the midst of which he had a stroke and subsequently died. There are many other apparitions, eerie sounds late at night, and footfalls from no discernible source. And then we have the Washington Navy Yard, the Tingey House, or Quarters A, between M Street southeast and the Anacostia River. Now the official residence of the Chief of Naval Operations, the home was built in 1804 for the first commandant of the Navy Yard, Captain Thomas Tingey. The Navy Yard was burned in 1814 to save it from the British, but the house itself was spared. Captain Tingey planned to will the house to his wife, but the Navy fought the will in court and succeeded in retaining control of the property. Captain Tingey, angry at this decision, is said to have posthumously visited his former home and scowl out at passers-by from an upper window. Others claim that he simply doesn't want to go off duty. Habits die hard, or perhaps not at all. Fort Leslie J. McNair, 3rd and 4th Street Southwest. Families that have lived in Quarter 20, the remaining part of Fort McNair that houses Army officers, claim that they have seen ghosts. Perhaps, for there was considerable ghost-inspiring history on the site. The Arsenal Penitentiary once stood here, and it was at this site that Mary Surratt, the first woman to be executed by the United States government, was hanged for her role in the conspiracy that led to Lincoln's assassination. Mary Surratt's ghost has been seen, it is claimed, floating down the upstairs hallway in Quarter 20, only to disappear by the bathroom. Research has concluded that the bathroom area of the present house had been the prisoner dock used in the 1865 trial. Others have claimed to have seen the ghost of Dr. Walter Reed on these grounds. Renowned as the conqueror of yellow fever, Reed did not die here, however. It is somewhat ironic that the cause of his death was appendicitis, something which we rarely think of today as being fatal. Fort Washington, on the Maryland shore of the Potomac, across from Mount Vernon. Fort Washington's 20-year caretaker had a more than average interest in the Civil War. He spent many hours reading histories and memorizing names and maps. One evening in the autumn of 1965, the young caretaker was making himself comfortable just inside the great main bridge. He had a lit cigarette and was contentedly scanning the far walls that were already fading with the gray light. Suddenly he noticed a mist rise out of the Potomac. He watched it as it centered on the old parade ground. This mist was different, however. It was light blue, luminous, and moving with slow deliberation. It passed the stairway to the lower level and began to focus itself into human shapes. The faces of 2 Union soldiers appeared. The soldiers marched towards the bridge, their coats aflap, their guns shouldered, and their eyes lost in the shades of some forgotten mission. All of a sudden the soldiers vanished, leaving the very young guard alone with the night, his thoughts, and a very severe case of gooseflesh. And the source is Washington's Ghost by Jennifer Harper, The Washington Times, for October 31st, 1985, which seems to be a source for a lot of these stories. Other places of interest to Forteans. The Smithsonian Museum Complex. The museums of most interest to Forteans include the National Museum of History and Technology, Constitution Avenue between 12th and 14th Streets, the National Museum of Natural History, Constitution Avenue at 10th Street, and the National Air and Space Museum, Independence Avenue at 6th Street. Found throughout these buildings are moon rocks, carbonaceous meteorites, a mummy from the early 19th century Philadelphia, fossils galore, a full-size mock-up of a blue whale, one of the curious golden airplanes from Central America mentioned in info write-ups, and endless quantities of fascinating miscellany. Library of Congress, 1st Street between East Capitol Street and Independence Avenue Southeast. One of the world's greatest libraries, one may find here copies of many of Charles Fort's original references, books, and journals. The National Archives, Pennsylvania Avenue at 8th Street Northwest. The microfilm reading room contains the files of Project Blue Book, the U.S. Air Force's erstwhile study of UFOs. National Geographic Society, 17th and M Streets, Northwest. Explorers Hall contains a full-size reproduction of an Olmec head and other fascinating exhibits. Additionally, page 8, it says, other stories will tell, well, this is a reference, other stories will tell that the Queen found the doorway almost completely filled with Lincoln's ghostly figure. This is Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands, saying that Lincoln filled up the doorway, his ghost. At page 12, another tale regarding the origin of the blood is of a fight between a newspaperman and a congressman in the Capitol itself around 1890. The congressman died and fell down these steps, leaving bloody traces for all to see. And that's the end of this little booklet. I think this is no need to do another one. I think we can leave it at this. It's a nice subject to wrap it up on. Let's see what we're doing next time. Next one is Haunted Virginia Tour. Not much here. This looks like it's related to a lawsuit against the U.S. government regarding UFOs. Oh, this one looks kind of interesting. So we'll do this next time. We'll start with the animatron connection next time. This is box 3, folder 6. Folder 6, item 11. Okay, so thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. If you appreciate my efforts to preserve the archive of Gary Mangiacopra and would like to support this work, every month I gotta pay website fees and storage locker fees, and I don't make any money off this website. Please consider becoming a patron of this channel. I'll include a link to the Patreon page in the description.